All right, so we are going to look at this middle section of this little mini unit, and we're going to talk first about farming communities on the Great Plains. Oops. But when I say Great Plains, these are things that we kind of think about sometimes. Look at that. There's a bunch of nothing right there. Big field in Lincoln, Nebraska. Beautiful. Notice there's not a lot of farm activity happening there. Big open range, and this is the Wikipedia stock photo of what the Great Plains is, of course, with a rainbow. And we have more people moving to the Great Plains starting during the Civil War because Lincoln passes something called the Homestead Act in 1862, where American citizens can get 160 acres of free land. They have to live there and improve the land for 5 years. And if after that time they think, I could really make a go of this, they can buy the land for $1.25 an acre, or they can just outright buy it from the get-go. There are also a lot of female homesteaders that go out there during this time. It's not all families traveling out there, but one of the families we're probably most familiar with that goes out there would be the Ingalls family, if any Little House on the Prairie reader or watcher fans out there. And people are most successful in the Homestead program, the Homestead Act, in the central or upper Midwest. There are people who are also going to settle in places like New Mexico and Arizona that aren't going to quite find it as successful because it's dry and arid, and not as many farmers have experience farming in those areas. The state government, the federal government, different land companies and speculators are going to also start buying different plots of land to try to divide up and where land companies and speculators are concerned, make a profit. That's going to be important when we get to the 19 teens and 1920s. This is just an image of Lizzie Crispin and her sisters. This was a successful female homesteading group. You may notice that they're living in something that kind of looks like a mud hut. That is a sod hut, a little soddy, which we'll learn a little bit more about here.
Not long after the Pony Express died, Nebraska got a new lease on life through the Homestead Act, passed in May of 1862. By simply living on a piece of land and improving it, and these were no simple tasks in the Nebraska of that day, a person could get 160 acres of public land. Thousands of the land-hungry came to stake their claims. Near the mighty Missouri, where timber was plentiful, settlers could build log cabins. But the wind-swept, treeless prairie farther west called for a different solution. The building material the settlers called prairie marble. Warm in winter, cool in summer, the sod house with its more than foot-thick walls sheltered pioneer families across the state. Here's perhaps the best-known sod house song. I'm looking rather seedy now while living on my claim. My fiddles are not always cooked the best, and the mice play shy around me while I settle down to rest in my little old sod shanty on my claim. Oh, the hinges are of leather and the windows have no glass, and the boardroom lets the howling blizzard in. But I'm happy as a clam here on the land of Uncle Sam, in my little old sod shanty on my claim. When I left my eastern home, a bachelor so gay, to try to win my way to wealth and fame. Whoever thought I'd come down to burning twisted hay, in my little old sod shanty on my claim. Oh, the hinges are of leather and the windows have no glass, and the boardroom lets the howling blizzard in. But I'm happy as a clam here on the land of Uncle Sam, in my little old sod shanty on my claim. kind-hearted girl with pity on me take, release me from the mess that I am in. Oh, the angel, how I bless her, if this home she'd make in my little old slide shanty on my clay. Oh, the hinges are of leather and the windows have no glass, and the boardroom lets the howling blizzard in. But I'm happy as a clam.
Clam? There ain't no clams in Nebraska. I'm happy as a buffalo.
Here on the land of Uncle Sam, in my little old sod shanty on my clay. In my little old sod shanty on my clay.
And if you didn't pick up on it, the reason they were making these sod shanties is because there aren't enough trees, enough lumber to make homes. There were 2 images in this little video that actually showed where people probably could have made a log cabin had they had the proper tools when they got there.
Well, I was born in a little soddy. Now, if you lived in the woods, they made your house out of log. You had a log cabin. If you were out in the prairie, they cut the sod just like they would cinder block. And then they piled them up, made the house. It was very warm in the winter and very cool in the summer. They made real nice homes. And then my family took lime and salt, and that was their they painted the interior. That is like calcimine. So it made it real clean and sweet and nice. And then we lived there until I was, of course, every child was not born in the hospital then. The doctors came to your home, and he had these black bag, and they made the delivery in your home. And when I was about 3 years old, my father had a land grant. Now, that means that the government gives you a piece of land, and if you take care of it, get it in good shape, in 5 years it was yours. So he was a good gardener, and the corn was tall, and everything was nice. And the cattlemen didn't want anybody living. They considered that their grazing land, and they called them squatters. They weren't squatters. They were legally there. So they came in, cut the wires, turned their cattle in, and just devastated it. Well, my father was pretty upset, and so we had a gun over the fireplace, and took his gun down. And my mother's father was our Grandpa Hamilton, and he said, "Elmer, you have children, you have a wife, you put that gun back." So he did, but he decided not to fight it. He decided not to try to live there. So we moved to central Oklahoma, not too far from Oklahoma City. And that's where I lived until I was 16 years of age.
Just like the interesting primary source references there. The Great Plains are going to become very populated. Remember, we still have Manifest Destiny as a thing. And the railroads are really going to help bring people to the Great Plains. They're not going to just bring people, though. They're also going to bring things. They're going to be able to deliver crops to different parts of the country. They're going to be able to, once they develop cattle cars, they're going to be able to move cattle to the east, where we're going to see the evolution of meat packing plants. They're also going to take different goods to the Great Plains that they're lacking. And the railroad also helps put these communities on the map. Whenever a railroad comes to a small village, that village prospers and grows into a town. And there are a lot of different businesses that start to develop because of that. And many of these people who are going to be populating the Plains region are immigrants. People who are going to move to the Great Plains are working very hard, working dawn to dusk, and that's the only way they're going to be able to prosper, to survive. Men were, because they had seasonal work on the farms, they had to search out other jobs. So sometimes they would be working on the railroad, or they would be working in local towns or sawmills. Women had the daily routines of taking care of the family and the farm, and children were kept quite busy with chores and errands. But one of the things that really helped draw these communities together was the idea of community and the idea of neighbors helping neighbors and being connected to a church. And the Great Plains does become known as the world's breadbasket, and this image really helps sum it up. It's a lot of people going to the Great Plains, breaking open the land that had never been broken before, and starting to farm as much wheat as possible, as much corn and soybeans as possible. And you can see this large team of horses with a very primitive combine trying to take out the wheat. The cultivation is really difficult because this sod is really tough. If you think about mud, think about something that's much more dense. And so new technology is invented, new machines, different plows, reapers, and threshers to try to make farming easier for people in the Great Plains. And then farmers themselves have to become inventive with the way that they are cultivating the different types of agricultural plants. So, and then one of the challenges that people in the Great Plains are also going to meet that they hadn't really experienced back home in the East, weather. The weather conditions from year to year vary quite a bit. So one year you may have a drought that's so severe everything burns in the field. Tornadoes, things that they had really never been experienced or exposed to before. And there are also going to be some years where there are plagues of locusts. It sounds very biblical, but it is going to destroy crops. So then farmers have to figure out, do they cut, just kind of take their losses, or do they go back home to the east? I thought that this chart was something that was interesting because, there are so many discussions that have really could go back to post-World War II era. Sorry, I'm being invaded by cats right now. That could go back to post-World War II era about how mechanization is taking over. The robots are taking over our jobs. And really, you can go all the way back to the 1880s, just looking at this to see how mechanization does start to impact the worker even during this time, where we look at how long it would take a farmer by hand to cultivate something versus a machine to cultivate something, and how much it might cost a landowner who maybe has to hire hands versus a landowner who now can have a machine and have fewer workers because the machine's doing more of the work. Now, there is going to be a toll on the environment that we're really going to look at a little bit more when we get to talking about the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. But it starts during this time. It starts with people moving to the Great Plains. When they're breaking open that sod, they are not on purpose, but they're inadvertently destroying plant and animal species. You see the buffalo starting to die out, not just because people are farming, but also because we have Civil War veterans who are coming to hunt because they have nothing else to do. And people can figure out that buffalo hide and different parts of the buffalo are worth money. And so cattle and sheep are going to start grazing in these areas where the buffalo has left. And when cattle and sheep are grazing in these areas, they're going to eat the grass all the way down to the roots, which will, over time, kind of destroy the topsoil because there's not going to be anything holding it together. And so you're going to, over time, see more dust storms happening in the Great Plains area. There are going to be different commercial, agricultural experiences, different businesses setting up thanks to landowners or land speculators. And so there are going to be some areas of the Great Plains, mostly in the southern regions of the Great Plains, where water is going to be depleted from the water table because they're depending so much on irrigating those fields. And then the government is going to see a need for different environmental protections in some of these areas, especially where different species are disappearing. And so the government's going to create an organization called the Forest Service and Newlands Act, which today is just the National Forest Service. And they're going to, we don't have national parks yet, but they're going to be instrumental in trying to create national parks to preserve some of these wonders, I guess, as well as preserve plant and animal species. And that is it for this very short version of Video Notes. Thanks for watching.